How did your upbringing influence what you were taught about dating? I have seen so many discussions resurface lately online about who should pay for a date and whether or not you split the tab and all of that. I have clients who will say things like, oh, well, I always split the tab and go 50-50 because I don't want the man to think that I owe him anything because he paid for the date. And here's what I was taught about that. And I think a lot of the attitude that I ended up having about dating and paying and a man providing and all of that comes from the fact that I grew up in a very conservative Christian background. I grew up Pentecostal. My dad is a minister. And, when I was younger and I started dating, my parents did tell me that, yeah, if a man asked me on a date and I said yes, I did owe him. I owed him the pleasure of my company. I owed him being attentive. I owed listening. I owed, basically being good company. I did not owe anything else. And I definitely did not owe paying for half of the date. And I think a lot of that stems from this idea that in Christian households, especially very conservative ones, dating is a marriage or bust type situation. You're only dating not to have fun, not to get experience, but you are dating for marriage, even, girls who are in high school. And for the record, I do think that there are a lot of things wrong with that mentality, and I can do a separate video on that. But for the purpose of this video, some of the things that I do think are positive about it are, one, the whole idea of, men providing or paying for dates and all of that, is that even in high school, I dated guys who worked at McDonald's or had an after-school job at the grocery store or did chores for an allowance, and that was the money that they used to take me out. And of course, if you're a high school girl dating a high school boy, he generally doesn't have a lot of money. You're not going to anywhere fancy, but still the idea that he would be paying for our date to McDonald's or our date to Applebee's or whatever was kind of expected, because it was a sign that he was already working on being hardworking, having discipline, having a steady, consistent job, that he was going to become marriage material. There's also that Bible verse of he that findeth a wife findeth a good thing. And I think it was instilled in me from a young age that if I were working on myself, if I was getting educated, if I was being a quote unquote good church girl, which I personally have some problems with some of those ideas now. But basically, if I was doing everything to be the best woman that I could be, then I should expect that I find a partner who, is a provider, who is a good man, who is caring, who is of good character, and not to settle for anything less. And then there's also the idea of, in very conservative Christian households, the idea that women should marry young. Again, not something I agree with now, but the principle behind it, I think, puts a lot of women on a crunch, and it can go either way. In some cases, it can cause a woman to settle for less out of desperation. But, in other cases, I think it can motivate women to really be strict on their boundaries and on their standards, because they feel like they don't have time to waste. In my case, I got married when I was 30. And even at that age, which, a lot of women now are getting married into their 30s or 40s. I have clients who are in their 30s and 40s, even 50s. And some of them, after working for me, are getting married for the first time at those ages. But, me getting married at 30 years old, I remember my dad making comments about me being like the last one in my group of friends or the oldest one to get married. And again, for some women, I have definitely seen that work at a disadvantage as far as being desperate and settling. But again, in other cases, I've also seen it cause women to set further boundaries and to cut off men who are red flags the minute they see the red flags, because they don't have the time to waste. So again, just want your thoughts. Like, how did you grow up and how did that influence the way that you date and see relationships?